Good afternoon. I'm Richard Evans with the UGA Extension Service, and today I'm going to talk to you about a strange condition called Ekbom Syndrome. This is a psychological condition that manifests itself in a very physical way, and today I want to give you some tips and some tools to recognize it and to deal with it, and then to, if you ever have a client that comes into your office, help them in whatever way you can. Let's hop into it. So you may be wondering, that's a weird name. What on earth is Ekbom Syndrome? Well, this is a clinical term for what is commonly known as delusions of parasitosis. Not to be confused with Whitmack-Ekbom syndrome, which is known as restless leg syndrome. This is going to be a person that believes that they're infested by some kind of creature. As I mentioned, this is a kind of a physical condition where a client believes that they have some kind of organism, usually a bug, an insect, a parasite of some sort that has infested their body and is living in their body, multiplying in it in many cases too. Ekbom syndrome is not a phobia. People that have this condition are not afraid of the insects that are, or the creatures that are inside their body, but are convinced that they are infesting them in some form or fashion, whether it be living under their skin, inside their body, things like that. The condition is very rare and not very well understood by the medical world, which might explain why people don't typically know where to go to find the help or seek the proper care they need once they do have this condition. The condition itself doesn't have any physical components as it is psychological in nature, which makes the condition not life-threatening, but in every case, very life-altering. The people that have this condition change how their lives work, function in so many ways that it can make them a different person. So very, very frustrating in many, many ways. So you might be wondering, well, what are the symptoms and signs that I could look for? Well, the most common one that starts is a sensation of crawling, biting, scratching, movement under a person's skin, typically by some kind of insect. Clients will complain about the bugs attempt to emerge from their skin. They will erupt like a volcano, I've been told before. They flood out of openings in their body. They're just trying to get out. I oftentimes will hear that these insects are more active at night or worse at night, which is a term called cyclical periodicity, which is cycles of increased periods of activity. Usually it's at night, like I mentioned. They'll tell me that a doctor has told them before there's nothing wrong with them, that they are making something up, that they're crazy. And that's why they've come to our office with UGA Extension. There are typically comments like, I treat myself with X and the insect becomes more active, another sign that they might be dealing with Ekbom syndrome. They'll say things like, this started with me, but now my dog has it, or now my spouse has it, or my children have it, which is a very strange kind of component of this condition that we do almost always see with people that are impacted by Ekbom syndrome. The big thing for me, though, as a county agent, is that in every case, you would think that after all the things I just mentioned to you, this must be a person strung out on drugs. They're affected by something in some kind of way. But in every case that I've dealt with, the person is completely normal. They don't show any signs of, medical-induced problems or hallucinations or things like that. And the other weird thing is that they typically are women. This condition has a very strange kind of demographic of older middle-aged women. And I, of course, can't explain that, but we do almost always see it like that. So what is Ekbom syndrome not? And we'll kind of get into each of these more in the coming slides, but it's not spiders, it's not bed bugs, it's not scabies mites, it's not chiggers or springtails, or even a biting midge. And as county agents, with these kind of clients, the most important thing that we can do is to always rule out what it can't be. So we can rule out the things on this list. Is it any of these things? No. If it's not, then we can move on to the next thing. So that's what we can do the most help at, is saying what things are not, as opposed to what things are. So as I mentioned, a bed bug is a possible culprit and one that I've been, kind of mentioned for many times, but these are not invisible. They're very tangible. You can definitely see them. They are hard to find, mind you, because they do like to hide in the deep, dark cracks of places like beds and furniture. And then they are also not typically felt in any kind of way, which makes them even harder to find. The weird thing about bed bugs is that the Saliva used in their bites typically does not cause an allergic reaction of any time or of any kind with humans. So you many times don't even know that you have them until you find their signs and symptoms on your on your bed, on your headboard, or your mattress, things like that. But a good example of not an invisible insect, because they definitely are tangible. Scabies mites can cause a rash on humans, and doctors are very easily able to see this. So if they come to you after having already been to a doctor, there's a good chance it's not this. Furthermore, if this person takes showers or bathes, there's also a good chance that it's not scabies, because a person that practices good hygiene does not have this kind of issue. So not typically going to be something you would see with a person that comes in. Chiggers, which are shown on the left there, are a very small spider-like creature, and we absolutely do have these. They are very hard to see, and they can cause a great deal of distress to your skin if you get into them. You can find them in mulch piles in your yard, leaf litter in your woods. Here on the coast, we have Spanish moss, which grows up in the trees, and they like to harbor in that too. And if you've ever had a chigger ever before, you know that they definitely can cause serious itching, and your skin can definitely show the markings of having had chiggers. Again, not an invisible creature, hard to see, mind you, but the impacts of what they cause in your body are very tangible and very easily traced back to one of those three things I mentioned. On the right there are our springtails, or our columbella, as we call them. They're little creatures that you typically will find in potted plants on your porch, in your house, soil in your yard. You can't see them with your naked eye. It is hard to see, but if you ever dump water into one of your potted plants and look very closely, it kind of looks like the surface is going to be moving with little white creatures. The good thing about these creatures is they're very harmless to humans. They're not pests of the plants in any kind of way. So in the case of people that might have Ekbom syndrome, they're nothing to worry about. And they would cause no adverse impact on the human body in any kind of way. So to get to something that does cause an adverse effect, if you've never been bit by these before, biting midges, what we sometimes call a no-see-um. These are tiny flies that act a lot like a gnat does. So if you are below the gnat line, you know about gnats. Well, these are very much like gnats, except that they bite you. And their bites are painful. They leave welts, they cause itching, and they're just a terrible pest. But once again, a good example of a creature that does exist. It's not invisible, and it does not complete its life cycle in the human body. It just feeds on you for that blood that they do need to complete that life cycle. So very easy to have a client bring you a sample of what's biting them. You can very easily see them, but they are commonly confused with this because they do cause kind of the sensations that we talked about in the clients that do have Ekbom syndrome. So the weird thing about Ekbom syndrome is it does have a very definitive kind of progression of how the symptoms work and how the clients react, giving you tons of clues about what you might be dealing with. As I mentioned, it's going to start with an infestation of some kind, and on the skin or under it, by some invisible creature, usually a bug. That's going to move to, as you would expect, lack of sleep, insomnia in many patients that can't get rid of the feeling, can't get rid of the insect. They get frustrated, they can't sleep. This unfortunately typically moves into the clients using some kind of object. Very, very unfortunately, it's occasionally going to be something like scissors or knives to collect samples or try to bring in some tangible sign that they have this condition or this creature on them. They oftentimes will use household chemicals to treat themselves. They'll use soaps at first. I've heard of like detergents, bleaches, borax, things like that, things you should not be putting on your skin to treat for any purpose at all. And then unfortunately, that also moves into the misuse of pesticides. So they'll treat themselves with things you would use on your outdoor garden, on your lawn to kill insects. So they believe that's going to make a difference on their bodies. That typically then moves into a projection of their condition onto friends and family, which is a very strange component of this. This is a very strange condition in and of itself, where animals begin to have the condition. They'll lose hair, kind of like if a dog had mange, and then spouse or children that show the very similar condition and symptoms that the client that talks to you about this situation have. Then, of course, as you might expect, their environment becomes infested. You've got things in your bed, things in your couch, your towels, things like that. That moves into extreme kind of OCD level cleaning, trying to purge the home of the insect, cleaning everything that you have to a very strong level. But as we would expect with a creature that isn't actually there and they can't get rid of it, that's going to lead to the destruction of those things, burning of bedding, furniture, clothes, terrible things there. And then out of frustration, obviously people are going to eventually move away from other people to not get them infested or infected with what's bothering them. So they'll live in a camper outside, they'll live in their car, they'll leave their home to live in a tent, and then they basically are leaving the safety of a home they're probably still paying for and trying to live in because they think they have this invisible insect on them. Unfortunately, this very oftentimes leads to them quitting or losing their their job because of some kind of mania or manic obsession with trying to get rid of this insect and trying to figure out what it is that's been bothering them or biting them. And then unfortunately, many times that leads them to come into the UGA Extension office and then talk to people that are probably less qualified than they need to be to handle a person like this. But that's where we find ourselves in a lot of cases, as the simpler the chance of last hope. So when they come into the office, what kind of things might we see? Well, you're going to see things like lint, debris, and dirt. You're going to see pieces of tape that have hair follicles, skin pieces, dead insect parts, just, you name it, it's going to be on there. Unfortunately, in some cases, clients will come in with bags of bloody tissue, scabs, where they believe the bugs are in there, eggs, things like that. And that's when you get to the really serious cases and the really unfortunate clients that deal with that. But definitely things that you might possibly see. On this next slide here, I have a picture of an example of what you might find. One of the clients brought this into my office and claimed that in this sample that they gave me that she was sure that the insect was on there. And as you can see, what I have here are lint, textile, fabric, and pieces of clothes and things like that. Maybe some hair follicle there in the bottom left corner, but absolutely no insect. And I showed my client this image on my microscope on my desk at this size, at this level. And still, after I showed her that, she believed that I just didn't find the insect that was in there. So very frustrating for the client. Obviously, they were convinced they caught the insect, and frustrating for me looking at under a microscope, knowing that there's no insects there. But as you can see, that's what you might very likely see in your office. So you might be wondering, well, what the heck can I do? What should I say or not say? Well, let's start with what you shouldn't say first. What you shouldn't say is that the marks on their body are bites. We are all adults in this job, and we can probably tell the difference between a mosquito bite, an ant bite, or a wasp sting, and then a person using some kind of tool to injure themselves with. So we don't want to tell them that. We don't want to say that there's something wrong with them. They don't want to hear that. Their friends and family have already told them that probably. They didn't come here to have us tell them that. We definitely can't say that they're crazy. That would be a bad thing to do and might cause an adverse reaction from the client, and just something we can't say. Most importantly, we can't say they have Ekbom syndrome. We are not qualified psychologists. We're not qualified physicians. We can't diagnose a person with a medical condition. We're not qualified for that. And then definitely you can't say that we can't help them, because it's what we're here to do. The taxpayers pay us this money to do this. We're here to help in whatever way that we can help. So then what can you say? Well, what you can say is that no insect or mite can switch between an environment and the human body. It's going to be one way or the other, not both. Insects or mites, which are the most common culprits, can't subsist on inorganic materials. That means things like carpet. That means things like bedding, furniture, anything in the home they believe might have been the source of these insects harboring that then moved into their body. That doesn't happen. There's no example of a termite that feeds on the human body or an example of lice that feed on couches. Those two things exist on their own host. There is no winged insect that infests the human body. There's just no example of that in nature. So when they talk about things that erupt out of their skin and fly off, which I have had mentioned to me numerous times, that can't happen. There's just no example of that. There are no examples in human nature of invisible mites that infest human bodies. As I mentioned, the nearest thing might be a chigger, but that's not invisible. It's a eight-legged creature that does infest your skin and can bite you and cause a adverse reaction, but it's not invisible, and you can't actually find them and find out where you got them from. There are no external animal parasites that infest humans. The animal parasites that infest those animals use that animal as that host. They don't then infest humans. So I will often hear a client complaining how the dog brought this into me, or they say that bird mites got on them. Well, bird mites are called that because they infest birds. And the mites that cause mange in dogs are that because they cause mange in dogs. When while humans can get human scabies mites, it's not the same thing, and they don't go back and forth. Human body infestations such as ticks, lice, and that scabies mite that I mentioned are medical conditions and must be treated by a medical doctor. So again, we are not that, but we can tell them that that might be what we're seeing if there is a case where that happens. In many cases, there is no such tangible thing to tie it to, be it tick, lice, or scabies mites. So it can be very, very frustrating. But in parting, what we can do is just listen and be patient, put ourselves in their shoes. If a person came up to me and told me, Richard, the sky is actually green, I don't know why you think it's blue. I can't imagine how frustrated I'd be because my perception of reality is that the sky is blue. And for these clients, their perception of what's real is that there are insects that are infesting them. So we have to treat them as though they have a real problem, and then, you know, to value them and to listen to them. Focus on the fact that you're giving them a valuable service. A good friend of mine has an issue with hoarding. I've probably heard of that condition in the past. And I know that I can't fix or cure that condition by helping them or by doing anything with them. But I know that when they ask me for help and I offer that help, in that day and in that moment, I'm giving them a valuable service and helping them in that moment. And with these clients, it's much of the same way. We can't cure their condition. We have no magic bullet, but in you taking time to listen and then to look at their samples and talk to them about what it isn't and what you can see, you're giving them a valuable service. And that might even be the accurate ID of an insect that you can tell. Say that you do get a picture or you do get a sample that has an insect, you can tell what that insect is. You can tell them that and then explain what that creature is and what it can and cannot do. But the hardest thing as agents that we have to be able to do is to accept that we can't help them in a tangible way. And that hurts me a lot because as agents, and myself included, we want to solve someone's problem. We want to take it away, give them that silver bullet that, you know, that cures it. But in these cases, we almost every time we can't do it. What we have to do is, if they have not done so yet, refer them to their primary care doctor or a dermatologist. And then either one of those two people could hopefully get them the help that they need, which would be a clinical psychiatrist or a psychologist. And I have one time in my experience been able to talk to a doctor that worked with one of my clients and told them about my knowledge of Ekbom syndrome. And if you have that opportunity, I hope that you can share that same knowledge with them as well and hopefully get them the help that they can be able to use. With that, I'll take any questions. My email is right there below and my cell phone is next to it. I would be happy to assist or help any of you that have this condition or have a client that deals with it, and I would be happy to ID any kind of things that you might deal with as an entomologist myself. With that, thank you for your time today and take care.